If you play games on consoles, you know what it's like to see a game you want on the other console. But what exactly inspires developers to make a game for only one console? Wouldn't it kind of be limiting for them? In a world where one console is often doing better than the other console, isn't it kind of giving up a lot of business? How much would the hardware companies have to pay to maintain exclusivity? And does that even make sense? Hi folks, it's Falcon. And today gameranx asks the question, why do game developers sign exclusivity deals? So short answer, developers take a large payday for putting their third-party title exclusively on a specific console. But the short answer doesn't really cover it. There's a lot of factors at play when a company decides to give up a large portion of the business, because not everybody buys both consoles. Not everybody can. I'm not a big fan of brand exclusivity, but it's not like I've always had the money to have every single console. Now, obviously, first-party games are exclusive for a very specific reason. When a game is developed by an in-house developer, well, there's not really that much incentive to put it on the competition's console. That game is a reason to own your console. And Halo was quite the boon for Microsoft. It sold the original Xbox, and Bungie basically had to develop the game exclusively for them, because Bungie was a wholly owned subsidiary of Microsoft. They were a first-party developer, just like Naughty Dog is to Sony. And we all know the Uncharted series has been as big a deal for Sony, and why Microsoft really wanted Rise of the Tomb Raider as an exclusive on the Xbox One. Now, Rise of the Tomb Raider is not a first-party title. Rise of the Tomb Raider was developed by Crystal Dynamics and published by Square Enix, and is the sequel to the widely celebrated Tomb Raider reboot, which, by the way, is a phenomenal game. So it makes perfect sense that Microsoft really wanted to have something that would act as a counterweight for Uncharted 4. Rise of the Tomb Raider is also a great game. I don't know if you've played that, but frankly, it builds on exactly what it should build on, but a lot of people missed out on it. I talked about it on Twitter the other day, and although it's not really a big deal to me, a lot of PlayStation people were very angry that Square Enix would put something that essentially started on the PlayStation and remained a quote-unquote PlayStation franchise for a very long time on a competing console. But Rise of the Tomb Raider isn't the only exclusive that Microsoft has secured. A much smaller scale game by the name of Cuphead is an Xbox One exclusive. As far as consoles are concerned, frankly, Cuphead is one of the coolest looking games I've seen, and I can't wait to play it. You see, Microsoft didn't just give them a bunch of money. Microsoft has also committed to making Cuphead a success with a marketing push that they just wouldn't have gotten. By the developers' own words, for them to make a game of the scale that's being released, 2 of the people on their 3-person team would have had to remortgage their houses and put everything on the line. Microsoft not only gave them the money that would help them develop the full game that they wanted to develop, but they're also marketing the game because it's an asset to the system. In this respect, it's hard not to understand why the Cuphead developers went with Xbox One. It does kind of seem like a game that PlayStation people might want, and it probably would have done well on that system, but it wouldn't have been the same game. And not only that, it wouldn't have been marketed in a manner that helped the game excel. For smaller developers, console exclusivity could be the difference between success and failure. I mean, think about it. Cuphead is supposedly going to be a very big game, and for that style of game, that's very interesting. Retro-styled shooter platformer games do not tend to be long games nowadays, and while Cuphead would have looked cool, and PlayStation fans could have played it, it would have been a smaller game, and it probably wouldn't have stood out as much. Just a great art style doesn't really put you in a class of your own, but a great art style, a scale that other games can't compete with, and gameplay that had time and money behind the refining of, it's quite possible that Cuphead is going to be one of the standout games that Xbox has. But to go back to Tomb Raider, it's not always the same. Square Enix could have easily funded the development of Rise of the Tomb Raider on its own. They could have easily marketed it effectively on all platforms, almost entirely on the goodwill of the first game. So what got them to say, yeah, you know what, Xbox, Microsoft, it is a good idea to put our game exclusively on one of the 2 platforms? You know, that's a really tough question to answer. When Bungie, the developers of Halo, saw the kind of money that the people from Epic Games made making a similar title on the Xbox that similarly sold the Xbox to people, but weren't a first-party dev, they reevaluated what they wanted to be doing, and it wasn't making titles exclusively for any console.
From all of us at Bungie, we'd like to congratulate Sony on an amazing launch of the PlayStation 4. And to everyone out there in the PlayStation Nation, we can't wait to see you online playing Destiny in 2014. Am I right? Yeah!
So why would an already successful, huge third-party dev make a deal to exclusively make their flagship game for only one console? Analysts estimate that they paid Square Enix about $20 million for the timed exclusive of Tomb Raider, an entire year of not having it on the other platform, and probably spent another $20 million in marketing the game, a la Cuphead. But where $20 million in advertising for a game like Cuphead is unheard of, Rise of the Tomb Raider, the sequel to an incredibly successful AAA game that people generally really liked and sold very well, it's kind of a drop in the ocean. My guess is that Square Enix probably still spent a very large amount of money advertising Rise of the Tomb Raider, and it didn't do horrifically. It sold $1 million its first month, but it sure started off slow. Another analyst said, if Microsoft spent anything under $100 million on that exclusive, it was a bad deal for Square Enix. Going by the first analyst, Microsoft paid about $40 million if you include the advertising that they did for the game. On top of that, Microsoft has paid much more for exclusives than is estimated that they spent on Rise of the Tomb Raider. For Grand Theft Auto DLC, like The Ballad of Gay Tony, apparently they paid as much as $50 million for timed exclusivity. They'd also done similar deals for Call of Duty's DLC, but that ended with Call of Duty Black Ops 3. That's a lot of money. When you consider that Rise of the Tomb Raider was supposedly their boon against Uncharted 4, which in the first week did almost triple the sales that Rise of the Tomb Raider did in its first month on Xbox One, and considering that a lot of people think of Tomb Raider as a PlayStation franchise, one has to imagine it probably would have done significantly better had it been released on PlayStation 4 the same time as it had been on Xbox One. Not releasing Rise on the PlayStation 4 in the immediate term lost Square Enix about $150 million, and in the long term, probably even more. People are excited about things in the lead up to them. Now, Rise of the Tomb Raider was rated pretty well, and people who played it generally enjoyed it. But now it kind of feels like old hat. Not that I'm sure a very large amount of people won't play it on PlayStation 4. I'm sure they will, and given that it's a holiday title, it would probably do pretty well. But it's still a one-year-old game, which is just not as exciting. The Rise of the Tomb Raider exclusivity on Xbox One has just kind of turned out to be a bad deal, because it seems like if they've spent more for Grand Theft Auto DLC, and the reason they were lobbying for an exclusive was to compete with Uncharted 4, which don't tell me it wasn't. So for a game like Tomb Raider, I don't really have what I would call a good reason to the answer why do game developers sign exclusivity deals. It seems not beneficial for a large AAA game studio to sign an exclusive for their large AAA game. That being said, a game more like Cuphead makes a great deal of sense because a lot of people that would have never heard of Cuphead will, thanks to the marketing dollars that Microsoft will put behind it. And the money that they got from the deal allowed them to develop a game that's significantly closer to the vision that they had for the game in the first place. So ultimately, the answer for why do game developers sign exclusivity deals, it's because they believe that they are going to make more money from signing an exclusivity deal than they would spending the money to develop versions of the game for other consoles. Or in the case of Spider-Man, it's a stipulation that the people who own the rights to Spider-Man made. You can't make a Spider-Man game without the sign-off on that. But for AAA game developers who would benefit by having their game out on as many platforms as possible, there really isn't a good reason to sign an exclusivity deal unless that dollar amount is ridiculous. Missing out on $150 million worth of sales because they kept it on one platform for about $40 million, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, probably feels kinda stupid. And if you're one of those people who's like, well, consoles are coming to an end soon, PC gaming is so superior, I don't care. Well, if you're interested in VR, Oculus Rift is pretty interested in exclusives. Just saying. Valve seems borderline opposed to it in the projects that they're funding, but they also aren't getting the press. At least not on the level that Oculus Rift has. What do you think? Let's meet in the comments and have a discussion about console exclusives. If you enjoyed this video, please click the like button, and if you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every single day of the week, and the best way to see them first is of course a subscription. As always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter @FalconTheHero, and we will see you next time right here on gameranx.